how did the international situations and, for example, the Helsinki process have the system change in Hungary?
The situation in Europe, the dividing of Europe, was a consequence of the many years of Soviet politics, and it had no diplomatic, no background in the international law. As a matter of fact, there were not the Western politicians who started to draw the rope, but some Soviet dissidents, some members of the inner Soviet opposition. A group, 11 people, formed a group which was later called the Moscow-Helsinki Group. And they said that they came together to support the execution of the Helsinki Agreement. But as a matter of fact, I started thinking on that. If the Soviet government signed an international document that they are going to respect human rights, freedom of religion, freedom of press, let's see what happens in the reality. So they started prepare papers on the real situation of the human rights in the Soviet Union. Interestingly, it took some months before they were arrested, but all of them were arrested. The leader of the group, Yuri Orlov, who visited Hungary several times, and he was a physician by profession, and he belonged to the circle of Sakharov, got 7 years forced labor. And all the members of the Helsinki group were arrested, with the exception of a lady, Ludmila Alexeyeva, who had an American husband, and he had the choice to leave for United States or to go to the prison. So she decided to go to the United States, which is an important element of the story, because arriving in the United States, she started organize the Helsinki movement outside of the Soviet Union, and very soon it became an international movement, and International Helsinki Federation was founded and functioned in Vienna and so on. And this Helsinki principle and the theory or the decision that human rights are not the internal political question, but it's a international issue, became a general principle of international talks and meetings. And for a while, the Soviet leadership and the communist leaderships tried to avoid this, and they didn't want to speak about internal questions. But they had to, because this was somehow the condition of the meetings. And quite soon, in '77, in Czechoslovakia, they issued the Charter 77, which revoked the basic demands of the Helsinki Agreement, Helsinki Accord, as it was called, and started collect signatures to this, and the Helsinki had an important role also in the Polish events, but it had an important effect also in Hungary. In '79, 250 people signed a petition against the sentence against Prague charter people, among them Václav Havel. He was also imprisoned that time. So somehow this was the beginning of this middle central or Eastern European movement against the dictatorship. So that therefore quite soon democratic opposition and all kinds of peaceful revolt against the dictatorship was organized around the case of the human rights and fundamental freedoms. And this was in the depths of the Samizdat movement by the periodical, which was called Beszélő. Still, maybe the English-speaking listener cannot understand that this is a play with the words, because the word Beszélő, which means speaker, means also this time in the prisons where the inmates are allowed to meet family members. It's called also speaker.
And how did you got involved to this word of Samizdat? How did you start to work on it?
I lived in a environment where nobody liked the regime. We knew that we live in a world, in a political system which is not freely chosen. There were some people who did not agree with that, but on the other hand, almost everybody agreed that there is no possibility to do anything. And the democratic opposition started that we have to practice our own human rights freely, so that we should go as far as possible to live and to work differently from the general standards. This was one point, which was a foundation of the Samizdat publications. The other one is that we have to offer some alternative solutions for the readers, because it became quite clear that the effect of Beszélő is much stronger than the number of examples published, because it was published in 1,500 copies, but much more people knew about it, mainly by the aid of the Radio Free Europe. And therefore the Beszélő tried to make proposals which seemed to be possible. They were not possible inside but as we are as we were closer and closer to the changes, they became more and more realistic, and on the very end it were not realistic anymore, because the events went over these proposals.
What was the risk you took with this activity?
The risk?
Yes.
It was absolutely uncertain for a while at least, and there were a lot of harassment and house searches, and we were followed sometimes quite aggressively by plainclothes police officers, but we were never arrested. So that's maximum we had to spend several hours in a police station. we were not arrested.
Uh,
Well, of course, it was it belonged to the situation that everybody lost the position, so that it was not possible to have a intellectual job. So I was fired from the publishing house where I was working, and usually we lost passports were confiscated, so we were forbidden to travel to abroad. But it was not so terrible.
How could you manage to work on the beszélő this openly, putting your name to it? Weren't you afraid?
Yeah, you know, it came from the Polish example, because in Poland the Polish opposition did that, because they were convinced, and it turned out that it was true, that openness is not a danger, but a defense. So that there was a person in Ózd who multiplied leaflets, not very high level leaflets, but quite a lot. And he was absolutely alone, and he put his leaflets in post boxes, and the police and state security organs were absolutely crazy because of that, because they were not able to find, because this was really a lonely person working absolutely alone, and but on the very end they did find him, and he got 3 years prison because of his and it was because he was unknown, and but it happened on the end of the story, so that he got his sentence of 3 years.
And with this much power, did you actually expect that the system would eventually change?
Not before '88, but quite soon it became clear that the events are faster than we were, so that in 87 it was absolutely unrealistic to reach real reforms, and a year later, 88, it was quite clear that the regime is getting closer to a collapse. What will it mean? It was uncertain, but that this procedure is going on. So in the last 2 years, it was already clear. Alliance of Free Democrats was founded in November '88. So in '88, actually, the fundamental forms of a democratic regime was formed, shaped already.
Our last question is, what would you do differently if you could go back in time and start it again?
I wouldn't like to go back. I don't know. Maybe on thinking on the historic experience since the changes since '90, I wouldn't be so optimistic as I was in '90.